Hey friends, welcome back to the shop this week. This week's projects I'm really excited about because they're not for me. These are going to be a surprise Father's Day gift for my dad. And recently he mentioned that he was looking for a smaller trailer to haul his Kawasaki Mule to the shop for maintenance or do other things around his property without having to need a really large trailer. So I found this Tractor Supply 5x10 utility trailer on Marketplace. It was a great deal, so I scooped it up quickly, got it back home, and started to kind of go over, make sure everything was really perfect before I took it to his place. And I discovered that some of the lights were not working correctly. With further diagnosis of the lights, I discovered that some of the wiring has already become corroded, whether it's the factory solder points or they were done afterwards. They were starting to fall apart or just not done correctly. So instead of doing a Frankenstein job on fixing the wiring on 10 to 12 year old bulbs and light system, it's time to go ahead and upgrade. So I'm upgrading him to a full utility trailer LED set that I picked up on Amazon, as well as a Deezee Trailer Tongue Box that we're going to get mounted on here. This is incredibly affordable, it's lockable, plenty of space for all that he needs for ratchet straps or tools or anything. Instead of tossing them back in the shop or back and forth in a car, everything will be right here handy for him whenever he needs it. He knows exactly where it's at. So excited about getting these added on. So happy Father's Day, Dad. I know it's a little bit early, but we love you very much. We appreciate all the help that you've given us over the years. So we hope you enjoy these small little tokens of appreciation and upgrades on your trailer. So let's get into it. Those shavings can do hell to dogs' paws, so I try to not knock them all over the ground to save the dogs when they come over here to the shop. All right, we got our holes painted up and we're ready to mount it. Now these come with sheet metal screws that I would not recommend using. That's why we drilled new holes, and I've got just some bolts and washers and nuts that I'm going to end up using to get these mounted on. All right, we are all all bolted down. That looks good. Now for these lights, the Tractor Supply trailers, they have this conduit here on both sides to run the wire through. I think it's great that it protects the wire compared to having it underneath the trailer. However, swapping it out makes it a little bit more of a challenge. So we're going to try to use the old wires to pull the new ones through to see if that saves us a little bit of time. But we need to go ahead and take off the old lights first. Of course, it's starting to rain, so time to move it in now. Now, as I mentioned earlier, these lights, they really do come with everything. You, of course, have the tail lights with the side lights that are LED, full wire and harness, license plate bracket if you don't already have one, side markers, and all your wiring nuts, vampire taps, all the things that you could use, but we're not going to use them because we're going to do the wiring right with soldering and covering it up. And then, of course, the hardware to mount the lights. I'm going to clean this area up with a little bit of a wire brush, and then I'm going to cover it with this Eastwood textured rust encapsulator to kind of help protect all of this and keep the rust from doing any more damage to it. Alright, so we've got the new line taped up to the old line on both sides. So, old lines, you may not be able to see it in the shadow, but all the way back in here is that metal tube that the wiring runs through. So we'll go back onto the trailer and we'll pull the old one, which in turn should pull the new one through to replace it, and it should make this job a lot easier. All right, that worked out pretty well. Now these side markers, they have them wired in using these connectors, which me personally I think is a poor choice because the water gets inside of them and the water just doesn't really get out, so it stays in and just really gets corroded over time. So we're actually going to wire these up and solder them together so we don't have to worry about that. Okay, one side down. One thing that I did discover with the new lights is that the wiring actually comes directly out the center back, whereas the older lights, the wiring comes out towards the end, or I mean towards the bottom, so it doesn't interfere with that bracket. So with this one, of course, it will. So I'm just drilling 2 holes to run the wires through for each of these brackets. All right, we've got our lights mounted. And we'll go ahead and do the wiring up. Now that our lights are on and wired up for the main lights, as far as the ground, each of these lights have a single ground, so I just mounted them to the back of the bracket since it's all connected to the frame. Self-tapping screws, pretty easy. Now the ground coming from the plug, this is one of the things that I'm not overly happy about, is that it's not very long compared to everything else, so we're going to have to extend this a little bit so we can end up grounding it to the frame itself. No big deal, but I just wish that it would have been a little bit longer. Alright, ground ran, screwed into the frame, and we have lights. Alright, now for the side markers. Well, bad weather came in, so I had to move this to the next day, but our side markers are mounted now. Had to pick up some longer self-tapping screws to get them to go through the steel. Wiring is hooked up. Also, the ground from the light into the frame is set. The only thing I wish they would have done is actually put some ring terminals on the grounds. It would have made things a little bit easier, but fortunately I have a bunch of extra hardware. So now the only thing left to do for these is just put on some wire loom to protect all the exposed wire on the tongue and the side markers. Alright, wires are all loomed up on the side markers. Tongue is wrapped up with a high visibility white. Side markers look great. Alright, my friends, that wraps up another week's project. Pretty simple ones, but incredibly meaningful. So thank you once again for following along on our journey. We certainly do appreciate it. And until next week's episode, stay safe, take care. We'll see you then. Bye.